Hello, YouTube and social media. Welcome, everybody. My name is K-Poc for K-Poc Studios Gaming, or on Facebook as K-Poc. Starborn K-Poc page. And today I am going to be reviewing Animaniacs 2020 reboot. And I'm thinking what I'm going to do is I'll give a general overview of what I think of it, and then when I feel like it's safe to do so, I will start doing like a reaction to every episode where I can be a little bit more in depth with it. So I heard about this reboot a year and a half ago, and I was already psyched up for it. Being a 90s kid, I remember watching, the good stuff. Well, what I think was the good stuff in Beetlejuice, the cartoon, the Addams Family cartoon, Animaniacs, Batman the Animated Series. I grew up watching every bit of that, and I absolutely loved Animaniacs when my mom wasn't keeping me from it. But that's a whole different thing. She had her reasons. I was very imaginative and impressionable growing up. So I think she knew in hindsight that if I was smart enough to catch on to some of the jokes in the original Animaniacs, that it would not look good on me at a young age. But I digress. A lot of that humor is back in the recent series. There's a lot more political humor, I noticed. For the most part, the characters, Yakko, Wacko, Dot, Pinky, Brain, Ralph, they all remain the same. Like, maybe a little bit older and stuff. This Animaniacs, if you guys look at it with an open mind, instead of trying to compare it to the original, which a lot of people make that mistake, they try to compare it to the original, and unfortunately they're going to be a little bit disappointed because obviously the actors, Rob Paulsen, Jess Harnell, and Tress MacNeille, they are a bit older, as well as Maurice LaMarche. So as you age, your voice does deepen and mature a little bit. And that is, like, to someone like me and other people who have heard them in the original series compared to now, you could tell that a little bit. However, they're still on point. And a lot of people don't realize this. When the original series aired and they recorded their lines, sound production would actually, with the exception of Maurice LaMarche, I think, and his character, the Brain, and the other various characters he played, I think it was mostly the Warners, Warner Brothers and the sister, that Spielberg and the others would pitch up about 5% to make them sound more kid-like. And a lot of people don't realize that. So if you go into this series thinking you're going to hear their voices exactly the same as before, that's not exactly true. I mean, you'll still get Pinky's Snarf and all that stuff, and it's just fine. Pinky and the Brain sound just like the original series and the spin-off series, but the Warners actually sound a bit older now. So that's one of the big differences, and I overlooked that because I know that it's been 22 years since we've seen Animaniacs. So that being said, obviously the actors are going to age a little bit, and that's not a gripe, that's actually a compliment. We see that not only the actors as people, but the characters of the Warners actually mature as well. Like, when they went off the air, I think their last episode in the original series was episode 99, one short from 100. I think it was like an Emmy sort of spoof or something like that. We don't know where they went, basically, to my knowledge. It's been a while since I've watched it. But I'm not going to lie. The whole week, this whole past week, leading up to the premiere of Animaniacs 2020, I was watching the classics. Not to critique or anything like that, because I wanted to hype myself up even more. I enjoyed the show so much. But I also had planned in the back of my mind that I was going to do this review, and it's been a while since I've done a review, so let's get on with it. So, the first notable change that people will see is the graphics obviously are far sharper, brighter colored, and just far better rendering, maybe, is the word I'm looking for. It's like the trailer said, they have the vector lines and stuff where they're crisp and clear. And for those of you who don't know what vectors do, vectors are a way that animators and computer graphic artists can use an image and twist it and turn it in every aspect without it losing detail. As such, it's a little bit harder to keep the shading when you're doing a vector image, and when you look back on the original series and you look back and you look at the current series, you can tell that there's not as much shading. Like the cell shading is virtually not there. It very much is 2D looking at its core. The 2020 style is a lot brighter with a lot less shading details. That's one of the biggest things that is different about this series, and in a way it's good, but in a way it's not. Like, it doesn't do justice. Like, it's really bright and in your face, colorful, like cartoon-esque, if you will. That you can't really tell depth as much in that. So that's one of the big differences between the original and the new series. Another thing you'll notice is there are some slight behavior differences in the 2020 reboot. Now, obviously, it comes from a time where things were a lot more loose and people wasn't as offended back in the 90s as people get now. Hulu and Warner Brothers and Spielberg had to be very careful with what they did in the current reboot so that they could not get in trouble or raise too many red flags with people. So, Yakko in the original was quite a bit more outgoing in his, let's say, vivaciousness, if you will. Like, he would literally fawn over any beautiful looking woman, and you get the famous line from both the Warner Brothers, "Hello, nurse." And you don't see that in the new series. In the new series, it's kind of like the Animaniacs are more a voice of reason in a crazy, messed up, zany world. Whereas back then, they were the zany ones, and the world was what we would consider normal back then. Wacko, there's not much difference with Wacko. He's still very much the gluttonous, eat everything, sort of mild wit, if you will, of the two brothers. And he stays the same, and you still get that famous belch here and there, but it's not as prevalent as it used to be in the older show. And I'm not gonna lie, as disgusting as that sounds, I kind of miss it. You get it here and there, but nowhere near as what it used to be. Then you have Dot, who was probably the biggest, I don't want to say biggest, probably the most, how do I put this? I'm trying to sound intelligent at the same time. Dynamic. That's the word I was looking for. The most dynamically changed of the three siblings. Used to, Dot was cute, you know, in her way, proper lady, you know, always trying to keep her brothers in check from them fawning over the ladies and stuff like that. You know, the whole, after they go, hello, nurse, and they start trying to fawn after her, she would usually come up and hit them with something or something like that and just straight up, boys, you know, that sort of thing. You don't get that as much in here, if any at all. Like, you don't get that Dot in here. She's still cute. She still has her cutesy stuff. But this incarnation of Dot, I noticed, has a lot more screen time, a lot more words to say, and in some ways is more demented. Like, when I was looking at the three in the newer series, she was actually the crazier of the three siblings now. Like, she had this whole, I guess, if you do bad to me, I'm gonna do bad right back to you, and I'm gonna outdo you, sort of thing. She has that going for her a little bit more in this series. She's also a little bit more female activist sometimes in this. Like, she has a song all about, you know, acquiring your tune rights to vote and stuff like that. She has a song in there about the ladies of the presidency, which is really good. I think that was something that was sorely missing in the previous incarnation. I think in the 90s, the original Animaniacs was mostly driven towards the male audience. This one is a lot more neutral, I guess is the proper way to say this. Like, it's more equal. And in some ways, it hurts and helps, because in the 90s, the writers and everybody was not afraid to push that envelope. And they wasn't afraid to have stereotypes, if you will. This incarnation, it seems like they're trying to avoid that. Like, they're trying to avoid anything that would just straight offend anybody, while still maintaining the wit and charm and the undertone jokes in this series. And I can appreciate that, but I do think that they need to push the envelope a little bit more on some of the satirical comedy, because that's what made the original series so great, is that they wasn't afraid to break the fourth wall as much. They wasn't afraid to take jabs at the political party. They wasn't afraid to take jabs at, you know, the differences between men and women, in a good way, mind you. They wasn't afraid to take jabs at that. And in this series, you don't see a lot of that, and it even says that in the opening theme song. They changed some of the lyrics. I'm going to see if I can pull up the lyrics, and I'll read it to you just a little bit on some of the lyrics changed. Give me just a second. Sorry, I didn't think this through. So, the opening and everything is pretty much the same until you get to the chorus, like the first thing that changed was Dot has wit instead of saying Dot is cute. And Yakko yaks is Dot is wit and Yakko yaks, which is not bad. You know, it's pretty good because she does have a lot more wit in this series. Of course, our careers have made comebacks. That's a new line, and it works. Brand new cast who tested well in focus group research. So that indicates that Spielberg and others brought in a whole new cast, and they went through a rigorous test to try to get put on, basically, to this. Here's where the whole premise of Animaniacs takes a big turn. It says gender balanced, which is what I was talking about. It's a lot more, you know, in the middle of male and female equality. Pronoun neutral, so they don't have, you know, different pronouns. They try to keep from assuming genders, if you will, in this one. And ethnically diverse. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the original series did have some mild racism style or sexism style jokes, and there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. And in the 90s they practiced the good way to do it without stereotyping too much, but in today's society you cannot get away with any kind of ethnical jokes at all. So when I say that there's a good way and a bad way to do that, I know people are going to flame up and say, well, there's no such thing as good racism and stuff. And I totally agree. But when you have, I'm not going to go into a huge spiel here, but when you have the same ethnic using, can we say, vulgar words about each other towards their race, and it's acceptable, but it's not acceptable for, say, somebody of a different ethnicity to say the same joke to a person like that, that's a little bit, you know, that doesn't make sense to me, and it never has, you know. Words are words. Anyway, it says, the trolls will say we're so passe, but we did meta first. So what that basically means is Hulu knows that there's going to be critics out there that are going to say they're passe, that they're, you know, they're just going to be trolls and they're not going to give constructive criticism. But here's the thing. In the 90s, they didn't care about that either. They continued to do what they wanted to do and wrote good stuff because they could. In the 90s, people were not as flaky as they are now. So, and they're trying to make sure that they stay within the boundaries of all the flakiness of society today, because they know if they don't, their series is not going to be on air for a long time. It'll get pulled because so many people will find it offensive. And there's so much you can say and do now to offend people that it's very hard to be successful in any regards. And they're trying to do that with this series. And then the rest of the song is basically the same. The only other difference is you should see our new contracts, which is a reference to them selling out to Hulu. And that's one of the recurring jokes you will see throughout that series, is that they will constantly poke fun at themselves for being a reboot. And in one way, that's fine. Okay, you can do that, and that's one way to be funny without offending each other, is basically making fun of yourself. On the other hand, it does get a bit repetitive. So let's go on about some of the scenes that you will see in there that's kind of iconic. We saw in a trailer where there was like a anime version of Animaniacs. I saw the episode that refers to, and I'm not going to give away spoilers. It was done excellently. Like, it was absolutely phenomenal. It could have been a whole spin-off, and it would be a success because of how well it was done. So, Warner Brothers, Hulu, whoever's in charge of that, I think you could find a lot of success in Animaniacs, as well as like a spin-off series, is what I think. It was really well done. There are some characters in there that are cliched, if you will. One of them being the bodybuilder you'll come across. And when I say cliched, when you think of a bodybuilder, you normally have the Arnold Schwarzenegger sort of sound with his voice like this. And that's what you get in Animaniacs here. You don't get something different. You don't get something that you don't expect. Like, I'm not gonna lie. It would have been much funnier if we had this bodybuilder, this big Greek god-looking bodybuilder in the Olympics. But he kind of sounds like this, you know? To me, that would have been way more funnier than the stereotypical Arnold style. No, and don't get me wrong, the Arnold style is funny. And I can appreciate that. The antics that they used with this character and with the Animaniacs, the interaction was absolute solid gold. It would have been absolute. It is absolutely fantastic. I love the series. I'm not saying a lot of negatives. I'm getting a lot of the negatives out of the way before I talk about the positives. Let's see. Okay, they took out a lot of the characters that we grew to love in the original 90s Animaniacs. They took out the Goodfeathers. They took out Rita and Runt. They took out Mr. Skullhead. They took out Mindy and Buttons. They took out Slappy Squirrel and her nephew. Skippy was his name. They took out, you know, a lot of characters that was near and dear to my heart, and what made Animaniacs great was the diverseness of characters that you would see in the small skits. And in a way, that I feel like hurt the series, because when you take away some of the original cast, like Andrea Romano, and then you take away the original writers and stuff, gone are the characters that some of them did. Like Sherry Stoner, she played Slappy Squirrel, and it was perfect. And Sherry Stoner worked with the original series, and Slappy was just an absolute gold mine of an inclusion in the original, and you don't get that. However, what you do see is a cameo of these characters in a Hunter versus the Warners sort of episode. And on one hand, it was hilarious to see that, because it's like, okay, yes, we hear the fans are like, okay, we hear you want these characters, but we're going a different view. However, if you want to see them, here they are. They're not forgotten, you know. And it was cool. Like, I'm not going to give away the ending of it, but the way that it ended was absolutely hilarious. And I couldn't think of a better send-off for those characters that are not making an appearance in the show. Like, you see them and you don't hear anything out of them. You just see them chasing. I'm giving away a little bit here. They're chasing off into the sunset the main antagonist. That's it. That's all I'm gonna leave. Okay, and it's symbolic to the writers and Steven Spielberg saying, yes, we know these characters are important, but they're better suited in the previous incarnation of Animaniacs, and they're not what we want for this one, but we do respect and love the fans and the fact that they still love those characters. So in a way, it's good and bittersweet at the same time, because you do see them, even if it's only for like a few moments. So that was actually a really good send-off for them, I think. And in that is Dr. Scratch and Sniff as well. You don't see him, I don't think you see him in that episode. I'm going to have to go back. But you do see him in episode 13, the very last episode in season 1. And it was a really neat portrayal of Dr. Scratch and Sniff. It was different in the good way, because in the original, Dr. Scratch and Sniff was this doctor who just couldn't get one over on the Warners at all. He was always the butt of their jokes, and he always played the victim, so to speak. And in that episode, you actually see him get a one-uppance on them. And I'm not going to tell you how or anything like that. But it was good. And like I said, in this new incarnation, the Warners have returned to a zany, unfamiliar world, and they become less of a nuisance to the world and a disruptor to the world, as they are now the voices of reason and conscience of the world. So I think that was an interesting take on this series, and it's very much reflected throughout the entire season that they're no longer the quote-unquote antis of the group, like the ones that are disrupting. It's society that's disrupted in this series, and it's very topical of how the world is today. And that's part of the charm of Animaniacs, is it's always been topical. Even in the 90s, it was very topical for the times. And they haven't taken away from that so much in this one. In this incarnation, like I said, the world has gone insane, and the Warners are just trying to find their place. And I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of rap. I never really have been. But there was an episode where there is a rap battle between Yakko and the rap artist in there, and it was absolute gold. I'm like, Paulson, dude, are you fixing to drop a rap album yourself? Because I would totally listen to it. But if I could pull up the lyrics of that, let me see. Just to give you guys an idea of how they are the conscience now. And this is a really long review, I've noticed. I had a lot to say. Okay, I think it's called J-Pac Rap Battle. So I'm just gonna kind of go through some of these. This is kind of when J-Pac was dissing on them, so to speak. Here's one thing. If Dot was my sister, I'd fire her, and Wacko even less likable than Elmira. Spielberg ought to stick to filming sharks, not rebooting this reboot of Groucho Marx. So that was pretty funny. And then it goes down here. The Warners are like bad joke told twice. If you weren't funny the first round, why would you be the second? Want to compare my 30 Grammys to your 8 Emmys? You know, that sort of thing. That was fire. And just straight up, Rob Paulson goes, well, that was just plain mean. You know, that sort of thing. And just goes back, nice try, pal, but Wacko's wish is I deliver a killer verse. I've been blessed and cursed with a bottomless lyrical purse. So, in this, you see Yakko's wit finally come back, like some of his wit from his 90s time. And let's see. Say goodbye to an easy battle and hello hearse instead of hello nurse, because he's trying to take out this J-pop guy. So that was pretty funny. He says, yeah, I'm zanier than Billy to the max, leader of the animated maniacs. You're the cure, insomniacs. Less fresh than 20-year baloney in my slacks, rather. I'm sorry. We can't be acts like Lazarus, we just keep coming back. This is where it gets good. We don't need to boast or roast or talk smack or rap about women, bling, and record contracts. Be honest, be cool, and people will respect you. Those are facts, dude. That right there. When I heard that, I was like, oh my god. He finally, like Yakko said the same thing that I and several others have been saying about rap in the recent years, okay? I'm not dissing rap. There is what I call good rap and bad rap, or good rap / gangster rap. Gangster rap is what I don't like, where they're indulging in demeaning women, they're indulging in drug use, getting all that money from contracts and stuff like that. Good rap, however, is like working hard to get what you need from coming from nothing, growing into somebody and something by working hard, not forgetting your morals. And I've heard rap about that and what I call the gangster rap at the same time. So in doing that, not only does it show the diverseness of the Animaniacs now in today's society, it also gives us a moral look at some of what needs to be said in this crazier world, like in a world that is so messed up now. And I know I get a little bit emotional talking about this part, but it just kind of it hit me, because it's stuff that I have felt for many years and stuff. I've been seeing humanity and the world spiraling down into a lot less moral ethics and more primal, if you will, style. And people get more kicks out of insulting everybody instead of complimenting and raising people up. Anyway, so that's one of the episodes that to me sticks out the most, because it absolutely, in that rap battle and what was said between J-Pac and Yakko, in that battle, it shows how the Warners have now been reversed from being these zany, unpredictable, disruptive kids into a more moral and conscious style in a world that needs it the most. To me, Animaniacs 2020 came back into a world and a time where we needed it the most. Okay, we have all this stuff going on in the world. It's just a really insane place, and there's no real conscience anymore. But off of my soapbox there, let's get into some more humorous things. There's a lot of presidency, political, and Trump jokes in there, just like we all knew there would be. I was kind of disappointed, though, there was no Kardashian jokes, but that might be season 2. So, you get a lot of Donald Trump jokes and how Trump is bad, but it's not just Trump. They talk about, in general, how politics are corrupted and bad now compared to what they used to. And that is really the only gripes I have, but there are some goods in there as well. Now let's talk about the other side of the cast, Pinky and the Brain. I found myself laughing and smiling more at their segments in this one than I did the Warners at some times, and then vice versa the other times. Because Pinky and the Brain is still the same. It's the zany, what are we gonna do tonight, Brain? Sort of thing. It has the non sequiturs like, Pinky, are you pondering what I'm pondering? Well, I think so, Brain. That sort of thing. It still has all of that, and I love it. It still has these zany plots or zany plans that Brain has to try to take over the world, and for some reason or another, Pinky bumbling it up. So I really enjoyed that. I loved the new animation sequence that they used for their theme song when it played. It was so well done and so detailed in some parts. Like, the thing that stuck out to me most about that one is you see this scene where Brain basically brings up atoms, and it's like a purplish hue and like a 3D rendering basically of Brain's face, and then something happens and the atoms go somewhere, and he kind of looks towards where the next thing they would show, like Pinky and stuff. It was really, really well done. The episodes were good. I don't have any gripes about the Pinky and the Brain segments. There's also like moral stuff in there. There's jokes about, and you saw it in the trailer and stuff, Pinky getting catfish. That's kind of relevant to today's stuff, where people who are trying to date or find somebody, they think they find somebody, and it turns out they're nothing like the profiles and stuff like that. So, and it's just an all around good time with Pinky and the Brain segments. There are other smaller segments, like you got this one that I really enjoyed, this little girl and this little alien trying to take over the world or whatnot. I really found that enjoyable, and I would love to see more of that one and see more of, where that could go. But there are others that, I can't even remember right now, and I just finished binge watching it yesterday, basically. So, that being said, I'm going to give the rating for Animaniacs 2020 a solid 8 on a reboot out of 10, because it mostly stays the same. It mostly stays the same, just in a modern setting with slight tweaks. It stays pretty faithful to who the Warners were, but it also shows their growth in 22 years from being quote-unquote children to more mature Warners. So in doing that, it shows that, hey, we're not exactly the same as we used to be, but we're just similar enough that you can still like us. So that is my review on Animaniacs 2020, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I look forward to doing more reviews. More video game stuff will come. I'm just trying to get myself back in the flow of it. I've been doing video games mostly live on Facebook under the Starborn K-pop page, and with the Starborn Dragons company, maybe? Anyway, so if you want to check out some of my newer content, go to facebook.com and look for the page Starborn K-pop. And this is K-pop signing off. See you.